So we enter the final portion of the final chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And today also happens to be Gita Jayanti, which is the day Gita was spoken thousands of years ago. So it's a very auspicious way to end Bhagavad Gita, just as it was begun. We saw in the 18th chapter, which is called the Moksha Sannyāsa Yoga, the art of letting go, which leads to freedom. We saw the true essence of letting go, both outwardly and inwardly. Outwardly, to not engage in unnecessary actions, and inwardly, to not be attached to the outcome of even the necessary actions. Then we saw how actions have various causes which are coming together to make it happen. The various gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, how they come together in order for action to happen. And being aware of the activity of the gunas, one can be free of the influence of rajas and tamas, and thereby right action with right knowledge and right renunciation can happen. So the important thing to recognize as we go through the three gunas and the way it was described in detail, we saw how knowledge can be of three gunas. Intelligence or the intellect, the buddhi, which discerns, is of three gunas. The resolve can be of three gunas. The agency, karta, can be of three gunas. And the sense of happiness that one chases, sukham, can also be of three gunas. So when we recognize that all of these are acting, that recognition leads to awareness. So it is not to have some list, various lists, and making these lists and getting caught in memorizing them or in checking them. As the song goes, making a list, checking it twice. That's not the idea. But the idea is to just be aware. When we are in awareness, then we see the operation of the gunas, and in the very seeing they are dropped. When the knowledge, for example, comes forth with certitude and thereby judges others and has some partial conception of the truth, it can be seen and dropped. When the same knowledge comes forth taking multiplicity as real and taking the separation of various beings as factual, that can also be seen and dropped. Then there is the recognition of the oneness of all that pervades across the multiplicity of various beings. Same is true with discernment, with happiness. Anything that rises, one can be aware of. It is just a question of perceiving with clarity and in the very clear perception, dropping it. When we drop the hold of these voices in the head, just through perception, because we see that this causes division, it causes suffering, it causes disorder. When we see this very clearly, then we don't go near it. It's because we are not having the clarity that we swim in those waters. Once we recognize these waters are poisonous, then we will not go near them. So the recognition is what's given by all these various descriptions of the gunas. It shows how when we are caught in tamas or rajas, that results in division, it results in anger, it results in violence, it results in fear, anxiety, worry, comparison. All the negative qualities come forth when we are caught in either of those gunas. So, to be aware of that and to drop it is wisdom. And when we do that, then we recognize what is right action. Right action comes forth through dropping of the influence of these gunas, rajas and tamas, and thereby bringing forth clarity, freedom within, with no attachment to outcome, acceptance of the outcome as is, and no anxiety about anything but full enthusiasm in the way we act. In addition to that, if we also recognize what is our natural swabhava, that is our innate nature, also plays a role in action. When we recognize that, for instance, one can be good in arts, one can be good in analyzing scientific pursuits, one can be good in technology, one can be good in poetry. There are so many various aspects that are there. When we also become intelligent about what our swabhava is, along with the freedom from all the various negative influences of all these gunas, then right action comes forth. If we instead struggle with the actions that are influenced by the modes of rajas and tamas, and also struggle with the actions which are not inherent to our swabhava, our innate nature, then it causes a lot of resistance, and not only that, it brings forth doership. Because to not flow with what is natural always causes resistance, and that resistance brings forth a sense of doership. So, to be aware of our innate nature and be free of all these negative influences at the level of the intellect, knowledge, resolve, happiness, renunciation, all of this brings forth clarity in action. And that clarity is what is referred to as Naishkarmya Siddhi. Naishkarmya Siddhi means, interestingly, freedom from action itself. So, how does it work? So, when we say freedom from action, it is acting without any actor. Earlier, too, in the Gita, Krishna calls the true devotee as Sarvarambha Parityagi. That is the one who does not think he starts any action. When we remain still, when there is no inner movement, then in that stillness, perception and its response happens without any sense of I am doing it. This narrative of I am doing this action and therefore I am the author of it, I deserve credit for it. All of this comes forth only when there is the division between the action and the one doing it. When there is no division, then there is no one to claim authorship of action. So that is called as Naishkarmya Siddhi. So Krishna says in this verse 49, Asakta buddhi sarvatra jitatma vigata spruha Naishkarmya siddhim paramam sannyasena adhigacchati. So sannyasena adhigacchati. So here he says through renunciation one gets naishkarmya siddhi. So again the word sannyasa is used in its essential meaning, which is letting go, which is to be free inwardly and outwardly of action and its results. And then one is free of desire. Vigata spruhaha means one is free of desires and there is no attachment. Asakta buddhihi. So when there is no attachment to anything, when there is therefore freedom from desire, then one is regulated. His jitatma, his mind is regulated, and he attains naishkarmya siddhi. He attains this great siddhi. So when we speak of siddhi, as we know, the word siddhi is used in the context of powers. There are various siddhis that are spoken in yoga too, and people pursue these powers. And there are many siddhis at various levels. Having great memory is a siddhi, or being able to engage in great physical feats is a siddhi. But all of these siddhis are very limited and they have their place. But true siddhi is, siddhi in fact literally means perfection. And true perfection is when we are free of the sense of I am doing the action. When actions happen flowing like a river, moment to moment, without any ownership of it, without any narrative about it, without any division. See, this is actually the best way to act, and everyone has probably come in touch with it even without knowing these words. When we are very engaged in any action, then there is the flow of action when there is nobody doing it, there is just the doing. It is called as being in the zone, for example, that many sportsmen also come across when you're in sports and when you are actually truly in the zone, there is nobody playing, there is just the playing. But later, the mind, through memory, goes over it and claims ownership of it as I played in this way. The same is true with any activity. If we are truly engaged in singing or in writing or in cooking, whatever the activity, when we are fully absorbed in the activity, that is when the best action happens. And that action happens when the mind is clear. So when we are having no division in the mind, when we are having no desire for the outcome, because even having desire and anxiety about the outcome will always affect the result. If we just focus on what is and not worry about the outcome and just engage in the action with all of one's energy, with total attention, then that action has no separation as the doer and the doing. There is only the doing. And such doing is called as Naishkarmya Siddhi. And that is the way of living in freedom, where action is not a source of bondage. Action happens, but there is no one doing. So that is sannyasa. True sannyasa is to renounce the sense of doership. And that can be done by anyone. It doesn't require us to go anywhere or to change anything outwardly, but inwardly being free of all the things pointed to is to bring forth this true sannyasa. And to actualize this is the joy of living itself. Because when that actualization happens, then every moment is just a joy of responding to what is without holding on to anything. See, there is a great joy in forgetting and just looking at everything fresh each moment. When we don't hold on to anything, then there is perceiving happens always on its own, and there is a response which is to do it, whatever is meant to be done, with love and with a great sense of responsibility too. Because truly, responsibility is the ability to respond completely. So, it is the opposite of what one might think of as shirking responsibilities, shirking duties in order to attain freedom. That never happens. That's exactly the instruction of Krishna to Arjuna, that you can never shirk your responsibility. On the other hand, you act fully responsibly, and that full responsibility is only obstructed by the false sense of ego. So when that goes away, then there is total responsibility in action. See, when we engage in any action, when we feel the love of just the doing of the action and the stimulus which is causing the action to come forth, when we are, for instance, engaging with anyone, when there is total love and attention, that love and attention has its own sense of responsibility. Then we don't act in a careless way, we don't act in a flippant way, we act with total responsibility, and that total responsibility brings forth the best action. We don't just do it just because of what others might think, for either getting credit or escaping blame. All of these calculations are coming forth only when we are acting from the sense of me. But when we are acting without any sense of me, out of the love and responsibility of the action itself, then there is excellence. That is when excellence comes. That is the difference between excelling and competing. Competing is rajasic, where we are constantly evaluating based on the other persons around, and we are just trying to get more credit or escape blame, and all these games happen. This is why these were all described earlier, to be free of rajas and to act with enthusiasm without a speck of comparison within, so that we focus only on what is, and there is excellence in the action without any sense of comparison. That's true responsible action. And when one has that, Krishna says one realizes the truth of being, which is the infinite, all pervading essence that alone acts through every one of us. And in this way, when one acts, then the mind is purified, the resolve is clear, and then there is no seeking of pleasure through objects, through experiences. One lives a very regulated life, eating simply, speaking as necessary, the mind, speech, and body regulated, and all negative qualities are automatically shunned, and one lives in equanimity and poise. So this is the way of living, which is very simple once we recognize the beauty of it. So here in these verses, Krishna says, Buddhya Vishuddhaya Yukto. That is, when the mind is the buddhi, the intellect is pure, Dhriti Atmanam Niyamyacha. When the resolve is clear and the mind is regulated, Shabdadin Vishayans Tyaktva Ragadvesho Vyadusyacha. When one is therefore free of seeking pleasure through objects, through sound, whether it's loud sounds or looking for other sensory stimuli to get pleasure, when all of these are then automatically gone. See, when one is going about with the notion of what's in it for me, then we are seeking pleasure through sensory stimuli. But when this sense of what's in it for me is gone, and we act out of love and responsibility towards what is, then there is no pleasure seeking anymore. There is joy of acting itself. The joy that comes through being fully present and responding with full attention is completely different from seeking pleasure, which is only of the nature of coming and going. And such pleasure always brings with it the lows that come once the pleasure is withdrawn. So that process is in fact well understood even by science, through how dopamine goes high and then goes low when one stimulates the senses through pleasure. But instead, if one is free of all these pleasure movements through acting with love, then true joy comes in the heart. Then Krishna says, such a being lives life with great presence. He naturally, everything falls in place. He eats lightly. Speech, body, and mind are regulated. Yata vak kaya manasaha. Yata means it's all regulated. That's in fact the word used for sometimes sannyasi too. They are called yati. Yati means the one who is fully regulated. Again, that's the meaning, not what one wears or what one changes. So that's why Yati Raja is the word for the king of all sannyasis. That is the one who is ruling not the kingdom outside, but the kingdom of joy that comes through regulated living is Yati Raja. So such regulated living and naturally detached from outcomes, then there is no room for negative qualities. He says, Ahankaram, Balam, Darpam, Kamam, Krodham, Parigraham, Vimuchya Nirmama Shanto Brahma Bhoyaya Kalpate. Then that's when all of these are not there. Ahankara, the sense of me, is absent. Force, pride, anger, lust, Balam, Darpam, Kamam, Krodham, Parigraham means possessiveness. All of these are let go. There is nothing to hold on to. There is no possessiveness in relationships. See, this is something that's very commonly seen where when we have someone close, especially, we try to possess them. We try to hold on to them. We build an image of ourselves and the image of them. And the image wants to possess the other person's image. And when the other person acts in a way that is contrary to the image we have, then we get flustered, upset, and so on. The reality is, everyone is a dynamic process. So we can never form an image of anyone and hold on to that and say, this is what you are. Because that is putting a prison for the other person. And then we try to make them conform to that image. And then we have a prison for ourselves too. And then they do the same for us. But true freedom is when we see the person as they are. We can never then say, in fact, that I know this person, because that knowing is always based on the past images. When we are fully open then we see the person as they are with unconditional love. That is aparigraha. Parigraha means possessive. Aparigraha means to not possess, and that's true with objects, to with things, and with people, most importantly, to not possess. So all of these go away. The possessiveness, force, pride, lust, anger, all this go away when one acts in this way. So the whole sequence of what Krishna described as the three modes in which actions happen, knowledge comes forth, intellect acts, all of this, recognizing this and being free of it, brings forth this way of living. It is through right wisdom that freedom comes. That is why it is said, Jnanat eva kaivalyam. Jnana means right wisdom, not knowledge that is learned through books, but right wisdom, which is insight that awakens in the heart. What books point to are a guide, they are helpful, but they can also become their own block if one gets attached to that too much. So one has to listen, read, whatever we do, to awaken within the true wisdom of the heart, which is free of these influences of tamas and rajas, which recognizes thereby the true spirit of action, which is acting with love and attention and letting go of the action after the action is over instantly, and thereby being free of all these qualities that are listed here. Ahankara, balam, darpam, kamam, krodham, parigraham, vimuchya. It means letting go. It's completely free. Then nirmama shanto brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Then such a person is nirmama. He is free of me and mine. Then that is true peace. Then one abides as the infinite, which is Brahman. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. And such a being lives in true peace, neither grieving for anything nor desiring anything. It's a very famous verse. Krishna says, Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. So he says, such a being, Brahma bhutaha. Brahma bhutaha means the one who is free of the false separation and therefore one with the infinite. Such a being is prasannatma. He is pleasant. His mind is always pleasant, still, peaceful, and na shochati na kankshati. Neither he grieves nor he desires. And such a state is true freedom, where there is neither any grief over what has happened or any coveting of what is to happen. There is just the response to what is. And such a one sees everyone as essentially the same. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu. He sees everyone as essentially the same, and therefore he is in true devotion. Mad bhaktim labhate param. True devotion is to the infinite. In fact, Shankaracharya there says that it is this bhakti is to the true non-dual, all-pervading essence that is divine. And he alone comprehends who truly the divine is. So Shankaracharya in fact here says, Advaitam Chaitanya Matram Ekarasam Ajaram Abhayam Anidhanam Tattvataha Abhijanati. It's a very beautiful expression given in the commentary. He says, what is true devotion? Mad Bhakti. Krishna says, the one who lives in this way has true devotion. True devotion to what? So Shankaracharya says, Advaitam, to the non-dual essence, Chaitanya Matram, that is pure consciousness, Ekarasam, the one essence that is all there is, Ajaram, Ajaram means ageless, Jara means old age, Ajaram means ageless, Abhayam fearless, Anidhanam endless, Tattvataha abhijanati. So he who knows this is true devotee, the one who knows the essence as non-dual, ageless, fearless, endless, infinite, all-pervading being. He knows what is the truth, and that is not a knowing with memory, that is simply being. It is not through concepts that one can know this, but when the false me is freed and there is no separation, then there is only the movement of what is. And that beingness is knowingness. As Ramana Maharshi also says beautifully, to know is to be. We cannot know through the textual knowledge or through memory. All of these are only aids. Real knowing is simply being where there is no division at all. And that beingness is what Krishna points to as true knowingness and true devotion. Then he is engaging in all works, but in total surrender. And he always abides in the eternal and unchanging state. Every verse in the next few verses are so beautiful, describing the state of one who can work in this way. Again, he says first, no work is renounced. Work happens. He says, Sarva karmani api sada kurvan. He is doing all the work all the time. So when we engage in actions, we don't have to give up any action, any responsibility, as again and again pointed out. But he is completely surrendered, not in the sense of, again, surrendered to any external deity or any external authority, but this surrender is only a letting go of the false sense of me doing the action. When that letting go happens, then actions are there without the actor, and all happens by the grace of the divine. And that state is Sashvatam Padam Avyayam. The eternal, immutable status is that state, because that is the way actions happen. This false separation is what creates this illusion that there is a story of the me, I have done this, I need to do this, and what will happen if I don't do it, the worries, the fears, all of that come forth. When none of that is there, then there is only the response to each moment fully and totally. And this way, one surrenders all the works to the divine, and the mind is constantly abiding in the infinite. And this way of living is to overcome all obstacles. So Krishna says, Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasya matparaha. Whatever actions you engage in, surrendering all the actions to the infinite, which is again, and it's very important to recognize that it is not anyone surrendering. It is surrender without anyone surrendering. It is just a state of being where there is no ownership of anything. There is just response to what is with full attention. That is surrender. If one acts in this way, then one is free. But Krishna wants, on the other hand, if you do not act in this way and you act egoistically, then you will perish. So it's a very strong warning, because What will happen naturally otherwise is the sense of doership. If it rises strongly, then we are caught in this me, and it is always in the duality of desire and fear, because fear always accompanies duality. The moment we build a story of the me, then we know that the story is going to end one day. We'll project time, and we are afraid of the time when the me comes to an end, and that creates in its own way various anxieties. As the psychologists say too, all fears are rooted in the fear of death. So we act with this sense of finitude and limitation, and which brings forth attachment, which brings forth desire to experience more and more, which is unending. All of this comes forth because of this sense of finite, limited, false perception. When that is gone, then what is the whole life is one movement. It takes various forms, and these forms come and go, and all that is here is only the presence now. The presence now is the only reality, and that reality is what acts at every moment. When we don't divide from that presence as me, then there is total response. Which brings us to the beautiful verses we heard chanted. Ishvaras sarvabhutanam hriddeshe arjuna tishtati bhramayan sarvabhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. In the hearts of everyone, what abides is the all-pervading order of the universe, which we call Ishvara. Ishvara is the order of the universe which makes everything function perfectly. Ishvara is not, as the mind might project, some creator sitting separately from creation, somewhere up in the sky in some realm, and having different images based on one's conditioning. All that is only mind projected images. Manomaya Kakshi, as Ramana says. When we truly recognize that Ishvara is the order that pervades the whole of universe, and that order of course abides in everyone's heart, Hriddeshe Tishtati, and he is the one who's making all actions happen. So this is the direct pointer again. As a compassionate teacher, Krishna gives the same essence in beautiful ways in multiple expressions. Here in this famous verse, he says, the order of the universe as the creator, sustainer, dissolver of the universe, Ishvara, is in the hearts of everyone, and he alone makes all actions happen. So don't think ever that I am doing actions. That is your core delusion. Just let actions happen, and they happen beautifully. So that's why he says, Tameva Sharanam Gaccha Sarvabhavena Bharata. So recognize that he alone acts. He, as in this order of the universe, that alone acts. And when that recognition is there, then there is no false, ignorant sense of ego rising. So to live in this mode is to live in the abode of the infinite. This is the greatest wisdom, and Krishna says beautifully that this wisdom is given to you through this Bhagavad Gita. And now he says, you act as you see fit. This is the beauty of how Krishna ends his teaching. He says, Yatha ichchasi tatha kuru. One of the great things about teaching in the East, Buddha said the same. Buddha said, do not accept anything I say, test it for yourself and find out. So that testing for oneself, finding out and living accordingly through one's own light is true freedom. Not accepting the authority. Krishna does not say, just do what I say. He says, Yatha ichchasi tata kuru. Inquire into what I have said and do what makes sense to you. So that freedom is essential for one to not be caught in any kind of blind faith or any kind of dogmatism, fanaticism, any of that, but just live with the freedom from within that shines forth through clarity. It is through clarity that freedom comes, not through blind obedience. There are many who unfortunately bring forth the sense of blind obedience as necessary, and in the process they deny the spirit of true freedom. When we accept blindly the authority of anyone, Krishna himself or Buddha himself or Ramana himself or anyone, then we are not actually living the wisdom from the clarity of within. We are simply creating an image again of an authority, and then we think we can act according to that, and that blind authority that we give our allegiance to can always be questioned, because someone might come and say something else. If one is a more persuasive speaker, preacher, then they will come up with something else and the mind is swayed here and there. So that's why it's important to inquire and be clear within and not go by the authority of without. Having said that, Krishna says very compassionately two beautiful verses. He says, what I have shared with you is that you can be free here and now if you simply let go of all false attachments and surrender everything and just act with this complete sense of inner freedom. So he says, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. He says, with great compassion, he says, Arjuna, and this is addressing every one of us, he says, for you to be free, be fully devoted to this infinite truth, the being that is all pervading, and worship only that. Do not, as it's been mentioned before in many places, do not worship any partial deities which instill fear. Do not create any division within. Recognize that the only divine is the infinite, all-pervading being. There is a beautiful poem that in Tamil that Bharatiya wrote too, which is pointing to the same thing of how people get caught in worshipping various deities, when in reality all there is only one all-pervading infinite being. So to have the other way to put it is, the highest pointer is neither polytheism nor even monotheism. It is the pointer that God alone is. There is always people caught in arguing about who is God. And then there is those who say there are many gods. And then there is those who say there is one God and He created the whole world. and then they say that one God has this particular name, and then another person says a different name, and then they fight over it. All this goes on in this world in the name of religion. None of that is religion at all, because religion in its true essence, the Greek meaning is to connect to the source. And we don't connect to the source when we are caught in these mental concoctions. The true pointer of Gita is God alone is. It is not that there is God and there is me, there is just God. That's it. Krishna says, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam, as he said, Ishvara pervades the whole universe. And he also gave this as a vision through Vishwarupa Darshana. So, all pervading, one infinite, non-dual essence is what we call as God. Everything else is only projected by the mind, and it can only cause division if we hold on to it as true. If we see everything as an expression of that, then that's fine. Everything that there is an expression of the one infinite being. So Krishna says, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. He says, Pratijane Priyosime. He says, because you are dear to me, Arjuna, I am giving you this highest truth, that just surrender to this one infinite being that I am, and let go of all other ideas, philosophies. He says it's probably the most famous verse of Gita. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. He says, let go of all ideas of dharma. This whole chapter is about letting go. Parityajya means to give up completely. It comes from the same root as tyaga. Parityajya, let go. What? Sarva dharma. Let go of all ideas of dharma. Right and wrong, injunctions, do's and don'ts. All of these are partial in nature. It's not that they are wrong, they are partial. But if you let go of all of that and just mam ekam sharanam vraja, he says, surrender unto me alone. And here ekam is given beautifully as the expression that there is nothing exists other than me. That's ekam. Again, Shankaracharya very beautifully says, Ahameva ityevam ekam sharanam vraja. Surrender unto me. What does it mean? He says, Na mattah anyat asti iti avadharaya iti arthaha. Such a beautiful expression. He says, Na mattah anyat asti. Nothing exists other than I. Know that God alone exists. Nothing else exists. Knowing that is to do mamekam sharanam vraja. When we surrender unto the divine, knowing that all that exists is only the divine, this total conviction, this total clarity, and the action that comes forth of it shall liberate you. So this is why this wisdom, this clarity is true love, true devotion, true karma yoga, because this brings forth the right action, and that is freedom. So he says, Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. He says, this shall liberate you from all sins. All sins are rooted only in one root, which is ignorance. So we see that there are many so-called sins, let's say. Papa means, the word papa means sin, whether it be anger, as we already saw, lust, greed, envy, covetousness. All of these are coming forth only because of one root, ignorance, which is the sense of me. When the division of the me and the egoic self-centeredness is there, then one lies, one steals, one is angry, one is lustful, one is comparing. It comes forth in different ways in different beings. So when Krishna says, Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami, I'll remove all sins from you, all he would do is just cut one root which is the source of all these sins. As already pointed in the 15th chapter, when we cut the root of the tree that brings forth all attachments, and the tree is rooted in false sense of me, when that tree is cut forth, then there is freedom from all sinful activities. So to be surrendered fully to this one all-pervading essence, knowing that God alone exists, and thereby being free of this false sense of me, and therefore free of any sinful propensity whatsoever, one can live in freedom here and now. So that is the pointer of Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchah. It's a very clarifying verse, because otherwise, for instance, even the Vedic literature is practically infinite. There are so many different Nyayas, Shastras, so many different Puranas, so many different prayers. All of these are there, and one can get confounded by them as well. And then there are other various religions, other various philosophers' teachings. All of this, it will take lifetimes to read them, to understand them. But the direct pointer which one can go to, by which all of these is completely bypassed. We don't need to then bother with acquiring more and more and more knowledge, getting more and more experiences, creating this idea that I have to go through so many steps, and then we build this idea of I would have many lifetimes. Everything can be cut in one instant by this one verse, which says, let go of everything, sarva dharman parityajya, let go of everything and surrender unto the infinite being now. Then you are free here and now. So with this verse, Bhagavad Gita comes to a beautiful conclusion. Krishna says after this that share this work with anyone who is listening to it with love. The only important quality of listening to Bhagavad Gita is to listen to it with true reverence and love. While questioning, the word Shraddha has been used before too. Shraddhavan labate jnanam means the one who has got Shraddha recognizes the truth. Shraddha again is translated many times wrongly as faith. It is actually a very complex word which has no single translation in English. Shraddha requires reverence, confidence, earnestness, sincerity, and testing for oneself. So it's no different from how if we go to a professor in physics and if he teaches something, we have a reverence for the professor for what he says, but we have to test it and understand it and solve the problems to learn for ourselves. Even at that level, Shraddha is necessary to learn. What to speak of the most supreme wisdom, where one has to have reverence for the teacher and the teaching, the confidence that the teacher knows what he is talking about, the confidence in oneself that one can actualize this wisdom in our own life, and it is not something to simply keep as a holy book in some corner of the house, but to actually live this here and now and test it in relationships, in activities, in life. And this way we bring forth true Shraddha. And Krishna says, don't impart it to one who doesn't have Shraddha, because if one is skeptic, one is simply what is called as engaging in arguments for the sake of arguments. It's called as Vidandavada. If one is simply engaging in skeptical, cynical arguments, then there is no point in discussing. But if one is listening with some reverence, then this most transcendental wisdom can be given to him and her, and they can attain this. And therefore, Krishna says finally that whoever studies this beautiful dialogue between us has done a yajna in jnana. So this is the way Krishna concludes. He says, Adhyeshyate chaya imam dharmyam samvadam avayoho jnana yajnena tena ahamishta syam iti me matihi. To engage in studying Gita is to do a jnana yajna. So we saw the word yajna in this very chapter. Yajna means sacrifice. We may have different ideas of what it means to sacrifice. Sacrifice is simply making something sacred, and the most sacred thing is to engage in this wisdom, jnana yajna. So Krishna says, jnana yajnena, by this jnana yajna, one can be free, and with this wisdom, whoever listens to Gita shall be liberated. And with this, Krishna concludes and asks Arjuna to end. He says, O Arjuna, has your ignorance been dispelled? Are you clear now? Very beautifully in Bhagavatam, Shuka Brahmam too, after completing his entire discourse, asks with great compassion to Parikshit, Hey Parikshit, are you clear now? Or do you have any other question? Krishna says the same thing. He says, has your confusion gone? Are you clear now? And Arjuna finally speaks very beautifully. He says, Nashto moha smritir labdha tvat prasadat maya achyuta stitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. He says, O Krishna, O Achyuta. He says a beautiful name of Krishna, Achyuta. Achyuta means the one who is unfalling, who is ever the same. Gata sandeha, all my doubts are gone. Nashta moha, my illusion is gone. Smritir labdha, I have gained right insight here. Stithosmi, I am now abiding in this clarity. Karishye vachanam tava, so I shall abide by what you pointed me to. So with this clarity, Arjuna engages in the battle of Mahabharat, as we know, and he got great victory. And Sanjaya concludes this beautiful dialogue by giving a few verses praising this great dialogue. Sanjaya says, as we can recall, the entire Gita begins with Sanjaya relating to Dhritarashtra what's happening in the battlefield in which this dialogue is happening. And Sanjaya has been given the divine vision to see and hear this dialogue. And so Sanjaya says, Iti aham vasudevasya parthasya cha mahatmanah samvadam imam ashraushadam bhutam romaharshanam. He says, the hair-rising, most wonderful dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, Vasudeva and Partha, he says. He uses two beautiful words. Vasudeva means the all-pervading supreme being is Vasudeva. In Gita itself, Krishna says, Vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma su durlabha. All-pervading Vasudeva. And Partha means one who is born to Prithu, but it can also be seen as one who is born of earth. Prithvi leads to Partha, the one who is born of earth. All embodied beings are represented by Partha. And by the grace of Vyasa, Sanjaya says, I was able to hear this dialogue, and it gives me great joy to even listen to this dialogue and to relate it. He says very beautifully, just listening to this, he says, Vismayo me Mahan Rajan, Hrishyami cha punah punah. Just listening to this, relating to this, gives me such great joy each time. And thus, Sanjaya concludes this most divine work with another very famous verse. He says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurtaraha, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. He says, wherever Krishna, the master of all yogas, is there, and Partho Dhanurdharaha, the great archer Arjuna, is there, because this dialogue is between Krishna and Arjuna, the great archer Arjuna, and his beloved friend, the Supreme Lord, incarnated as Krishna. There is victory, glory, and prosperity and order. Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Dhruva Niti. All this happens. So whenever we invoke this dialogue, we listen to it, we contemplate upon it, we invoke the presence of Arjuna and Krishna in the battlefield, and we listen to it to understand what is the way to live our own life, the battle of life that goes on. And by doing it correctly, there is glory, there is victory, there is true prosperity and joy. And that comes forth through the listening of the Gita. With this, the most glorious 18th chapter, the final chapter of Gita, comes to a conclusion. And the whole of Bhagavad Gita ends, Iti Sri Mahabharate Shatasahasrayam Samhitayam Vayasikyam Bhishma Parvani Yoga Shastre Sri Krishnarjuna Samvade Moksha Sannyāsa Yogo Nama Ashtadashodhyayah. The 18th chapters of Bhagavad Gita ends with this very verse, glorifying Krishna and Arjuna and the dialogue between them, and how this very dialogue elevates anyone who listens, contemplates, and lives by it. The beauty of Gita is it's a samvada. Samvada means a dialogue. All of Upanishads are also as dialogues. So when we have a dialogue, then we listen and we speak both from the ground of no egoic attachment. That is true dialogue. And when we are listening and speaking in this way, then that very listening and speaking becomes a meditation, and it brings forth clarity. And to listen to a dialogue like Gita, which is giving the most supreme wisdom in the most practical of all situations, makes it accessible to all of us. So every human is capable of living this wisdom, and we are all eminently qualified to live it only if we take it up sincerely. And then we can actually also bring about in our own domain, wherever it is, work or family or even larger domains, a different way of living as well.